Here's why people absolutely fall in love with McLarens. Now, before I got to work at the dealership and before I got to drive McLarens like the 570S, 720S, 750S, and now the Artura, I had no clue as to why people loved McLarens. I thought their interiors were bland and ugly. I thought that, yeah, they look cool on the outside. They got the doors that go up, but Lambos just look so much cooler and they're louder. And so I didn't really understand the hype as to why people really enjoyed McLarens. Yeah, sure, we know the hydraulic steering is nice and all, but could it really be that much of a better driving experience compared to Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and whatever in that price range? And it wasn't until I drove one that I realized, holy shit, it actually does. And the aerodynamics, especially on these non-special edition cars, are absolutely there, but they're, especially like Ferrari, how they are hidden. Like, you can definitely tell that there's aero there, but you don't see any big wings or anything like that. They sculpt the air around the vehicle. Like, look what they do with these flying buttresses. All of that is aerodynamic to make sure this vehicle is planted to the ground while you're driving it hard. Now, as I said, this interior isn't necessarily styled the best, but it is probably one of the most intuitive to use compared to things like the Lamborghini. And I mean, the Ferrari is pretty good, but this is probably the best, especially with the screen here. Now, setting off in comfort handling and in sport powertrain, this rides very smoothly. Oh my God, compared to the Huracan, oh my God, this is like an S-Class. And it's crazy because the Huracan really has no business being as stiff as it is if you can make a performance car ride as smoothly as McLaren does. And that is one of the first things why people love McLarens, is because it rides smoothly while giving you immense confidence in the handling capabilities of it, because it has a stiff chassis made of carbon fiber. Now, I prefer the V8 McLarens over the Artura just because of the sound. I'm not the biggest fan of this soundtrack that is going on behind me, but the driving dynamics of this Artura is pretty much very similar or even better than in the 720S or the 570S. And one of the things you notice immediately is this steering feel. It is much heavier when you're not moving, but when you actually start to move, it lightens up, the wheel lightens up, and there's plenty of texture and feel compared to other things that are on the market. Interesting. Now, I will say with McLarens, the power band typically tends to be more on the explosive side, whereas Ferrari tends to be on the progressive side. Yes, they use turbochargers now, but how it's tuned in the McLarens is tuned to be a lot more explosive in the power delivery and feel than compared to the Ferraris, which is why the sensation of speed in the McLarens tend to be a lot crazier, and people tend to think and feel, rightly so, that the McLarens are the faster car compared to the other exotics that are out there. Now, this Artura, since it's a V6 that is hybridized, the power is shoved a little bit more so to that top end, so it does still beg you to rev. It doesn't have that crazy torque shove that the 750S had when I drove it, around that middle 4,000 to 5,000 RPM. And this has a rev limiter up to 8,000 RPMs, which is pretty good for a turbocharged motor. By the way, guys, I really love this ambient lighting. I'm pretty sure you can change the color of it in the infotainment, which I don't really have the time to figure out. This is more about how do we enjoy the drive of the McLaren. And obviously, guys, you can bump up the handling to track mode, which is going to be the stiffest of them all right here with the controls that you have. That is pretty much attached to this whole digital gauge cluster. But I don't really think you need a track handling mode, especially on the street. I think the comfort does you just perfectly fine. So as I said, the chassis on this is very, very confidence inspiring. It's very rigid, although the suspension itself and the dampening is on the softer side, which is actually what you can and should be able to do when you have a tight chassis. This is something that Lamborghini has not seemed to figure out. They just ride hard as hell for no reason. Yeah, there was a little bit of wheel spin there, which is something that you can mitigate easily with McLaren's electronic systems, which is really on par with some of the best in the world. And those electric noises sound interesting with the motor. It feels naturally aspirated for sure. Steering feels very, very direct and light, full of feel. This car just begs you to push its limits, but we're not going to do that. But great handling, just gives you so much confidence. And so does the braking, which you have to press a lot harder than you do in other cars, but it's to add to the whole race car-like feel to it. Doesn't sound the best on this car. But yeah, guys, as to why people really, really enjoy the McLarens is because they ride well, they look nice, they have the wow effect, especially with the doors that go up. The steering is very direct. It's full of feel and confidence. It's just an easy car to live with every day. The McLarens have good visibility through the back to the sides, unlike the Lamborghinis, which are just terrible visibility wise. And as you can tell, this is a hybrid, so there are bits of practicality that you gain with having a hybrid vehicle versus not having one. Now guys, if you are interested in this McLaren Artura, they're actually doing a couple of deals on them. They're doing $30,000 off on this one specifically if you were leasing it, and then about $22,000 off on a cash purchase. So yeah guys, that is the video for today, guys. Let me know what you think about McLarens, if you would pick them over the other exotics in the marketplace right now. Guys, till next time.